in the glittering world of the super-rich image is everything. For Amelia Sterling, her image was supposed to be one of perfection, the beautiful, adoring wife of self-made tech millionaire Richard Sterling. But tonight at the city's most prestigious charity gala, 7 months pregnant and deeply insecure, her perfect image is about to be shattered. What starts with a whisper of contempt over the faint silver lines on her skin will escalate into a public humiliation so profound it will bring her to her knees. But in the ashes of that humiliation, a secret will be revealed, a secret so powerful it will not only destroy her husband, but crown her an empress in the very world that tried to cast her out. Stay with me, because this isn't a fairy tale. It's a story of brutal betrayal and breathtaking revenge. The silence in their penthouse apartment atop the Sterling Tower was a specific kind of silence. It wasn't peaceful. It was the heavy, oppressive quiet of unspoken resentments, a silence that hummed with the low-frequency drone of the city below and the even lower frequency of a dying marriage. Amelia Sterling stood before a floor-to-ceiling mirror, her reflection a stranger she was still getting used to. 7 months. The swell of her belly was a constant, miraculous reminder of the life growing within her, a daughter she already loved with a fierce, protective instinct. It was the only pure, uncomplicated thing in her life. The rest of her world was a labyrinth of mirrored surfaces and polished marble, reflecting a life that looked perfect from the outside but felt hollow from within. Her husband, Richard Sterling, was a man carved from ambition and arrogance. He hadn't been born into money. He'd clawed his way to it with a ruthless software patent and a personality that charmed investors and crushed competitors. When they met, Amelia had been a junior art curator full of passion for Renaissance portraiture and quiet evenings. He had been a whirlwind of charisma, sweeping her into a life of private jets, spontaneous trips to Monaco, and closets filled with clothes she'd only ever seen in magazines. He had called her his calm in the storm, his classic beauty. Now, 5 years later, the storm had become his permanent state of being, and her classic beauty was something he appraised with a critical stockholder's eye. The pregnancy had shifted the calculus of their relationship. At first, he'd been ecstatic, parading the news around as the ultimate proof of his virility and success. A legacy was being built. The Sterling dynasty was beginning. But as her body changed, so did his gaze. It lingered on her swollen ankles, the fuller curve of her face, and most recently, the faint silvery tracks that had begun to map their way across the stretched skin of her stomach and hips. The stretch marks. To her, they were the first tender etchings of motherhood. To him, they were flaws in his prized possession. "Is that the dress?" His voice, sharp and impatient, cut through the silence. Amelia turned. Richard stood in the doorway of their cavernous walk-in closet, already immaculate in a custom-tailored Tom Ford tuxedo. His dark hair was perfectly coiffed, and the harsh lines of his jaw were softened by a practiced, media-ready smile that never quite reached his cold blue eyes. She looked back at her reflection. The dress was a bespoke creation in emerald silk designed to flow elegantly over her bump. "It is. Do you like it?" The hesitation in her voice was a creature she hated, a timid mouse that had taken up residence in her throat ever since she'd become financially and emotionally dependent on him. He walked over his expensive leather shoes, making no sound on the plush auburn carpet. He circled her slowly, his eyes narrowed in assessment. "It's fine. A bit voluminous. Makes you look bigger than you are." Amelia's hand went instinctively to her belly. "Well, I am bigger, Richard. I'm growing our child." "I'm aware," he said, stopping behind her. He reached around his hands, not finding her waist, but instead tugging at the fabric near her lower back. It's just this material. It's not very forgiving. We need to maintain a standard, Amelia, especially tonight. The Starlight Foundation Gala is the event of the season. Everyone will be there. The mayor, senators, half the CEOs on the Forbes list. We need to maintain a standard. It was his favorite phrase. It applied to the thread count of their sheets, the vintage of their wine, and the flawlessness of his wife. He ran a hand over her hair. It used to be a gesture of affection. Now it felt like a handler checking his show pony. Just make sure the makeup artist hides the tiredness around your eyes. You've looked drained lately. He leaned in his lips, brushing her ear. His whisper was meant to be intimate, but it felt like a threat. I need you to be perfect tonight, darling. No mistakes. He walked away, leaving her alone with her reflection again. The woman in the mirror looked pale, her eyes wide with a familiar sting of humiliation. She pulled the silk of her dress taut against her stomach. There they were, the faint, shimmering lines he despised. Her tiger stripes, her mother had called them over the phone, a symbol of a woman's strength. But in Richard's world, they were just ugly scars on his property. The next few hours were a blur of forced beautification. A makeup artist named Antoine, flown in from Paris, worked to contour away her fatigue. A hairstylist fussed over every strand, creating a sculpture of elegant waves. Through it all, Amelia was silent, a living doll being prepared for display. She thought of the baby, her little Chloe, as she'd decided to name her. She imagined reading her stories, not about princesses in towers waiting for a prince, but about warrior queens who built their own castles. It was a fantasy that felt 1,000,000 miles away. As they were about to leave, Richard did his final inspection. He adjusted the strap of her dress, his fingers brushing against her bare shoulder. His touch was cold. "Let's go," he commanded. "And Amelia, remember to smile. You're the happiest woman in the world. Everyone should believe it." In the back of the chauffeured Bentley, the city lights streaked past in a dizzying display of wealth and power. Richard was on his phone, barking orders at a subordinate. "I don't care what it takes, get the deal closed before the market opens in Tokyo. I want their entire microprocessing division. Liquidate whatever you have to." Amelia stared out the window, her hand resting on the gentle flutter of movement in her womb. She felt a profound sense of loneliness, the kind that can only be experienced when you're sitting right next to someone who is supposed to love you. She was Richard Sterling's wife, a name that opened doors and commanded respect. But she, Amelia, felt invisible. Tonight, she was an accessory to his ambition, a pregnant prop in his grand performance. She had no idea that the performance was about to take a turn he could never have anticipated. The Centennial Grand Hotel was a monument to old-world opulence. Valets in crisp crimson uniforms swarmed the arriving luxury cars. The air itself seemed to shimmer with the flash of camera bulbs and the collective weight of the fortunes gathered within. Stepping out of the Bentley, Richard was immediately in his element. He placed a possessive hand on the small of Amelia's back, guiding her forward into the fray. His smile was dazzling, a weapon he wielded with practiced ease. "Richard, over here," a photographer shouted. He angled them perfectly, his hand tightening its grip on her. "Smile, darling," he murmured the command, lost in the cacophony. Amelia produced a smile that felt like cracking porcelain. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her, appraising her, judging her. Judging the bump, the dress, the woman who had landed, Richard Sterling. Inside the ballroom was breathtaking. Chandeliers like frozen waterfalls cascaded from a gilded ceiling. An orchestra played softly in the corner. The room was a sea of designer gowns, glittering diamonds and powerful men in tuxedos, their laughter booming with the confidence of those who shaped the world. "Ah, sterling glad you could make it." A portly man with a booming voice, a real estate tycoon named Marcus Lanya, clapped Richard on the back. "And the lovely Amelia glowing, my dear, absolutely glowing." "She's my greatest asset," Richard said with a laugh, pulling her closer. The comment was meant to be a compliment, but it landed like a stone in Amelia's stomach. An asset, like a stock or a building or a patent. For the next hour they moved through the room, a royal couple holding court. Richard was magnetic, shaking hands, making introductions. His voice a smooth purr of influence. Amelia floated in his wake, offering pleasantries and polite smiles, her mind a million miles away. She felt a strange sense of disassociation, as if she were watching a movie of her own life. She noticed a woman across the room watching them. She was tall, impossibly thin, and poured into a red dress that seemed to defy gravity. Her lips were a slash of crimson, and her gaze was sharp and predatory. Tiffany Vance, a socialite, which in their circle was a euphemism for a woman with a trust fund and no discernible career who specialized in appearing at the right parties with the right people. Amelia knew Richard had a history with her before they were married. Lately she'd seen Tiffany's name pop up on Richard's private call log more than once. The brief, knowing smirk Tiffany shot in Richard's direction confirmed every suspicion Amelia had been trying to bury. Her heart ached with a dull, familiar pain. She needed a moment. "Richard, I'm just going to get a glass of water," she said quietly, touching his arm. He barely looked at her, engrossed in a conversation with a senator. "Fine, fine. Don't wander off." Making her way through the throng, Amelia felt a wave of dizziness. The air was thick with perfume and ambition. She found a small, secluded alcove near a balcony, momentarily hidden from view by a large potted palm. She leaned against the cool marble wall, closing her eyes and taking a deep breath. One hand rested on her belly, a silent communication with her daughter. "We're okay. We'll be okay." "Hiding, are we?" The voice was like honey laced with arsenic. Amelia opened her eyes. Tiffany Vance was standing there, a champagne flute held delicately in her manicured fingers. "Just catching my breath," Amelia replied, her voice cooler than she expected. Tiffany's eyes roamed over Amelia's body, a slow, insulting appraisal. "Pregnancy suits some women. They get that rustic earth mother glow. It's very provincial." She took a slow sip of her champagne. "Richard, on the other hand, is anything but provincial. He's a man who appreciates sleek lines, polished surfaces, perfection." The implication was clear, a stiletto heel pressed into an open wound. Before Amelia could form a response, Richard appeared, his smile tightening slightly when he saw Tiffany. "Tiffany, always a pleasure," he said smoothly. "Amelia, I was looking for you. Carter and Blake were just asking about our trip to Aspen." Carter and Blake were two of Richard's closest friends, tech bros, who had ridden his coattails to their own smaller fortunes. They were sycophants who mirrored Richard's arrogance. He led Amelia back into the heart of the crowd, his grip on her arm, now painfully tight. They joined a small circle, Carter, Blake, and their respective rail-thin dates. "There she is," Carter boomed. "The mother-to-be, how are you holding up?" "Amelia, Richard tells us you've been a delicate flower lately." "I'm feeling wonderful, thank you," Amelia said, forcing another smile. Richard laughed, a loud, performative sound. "She's a trooper, though her body is staging a bit of a rebellion. It's a whole new landscape, isn't it, darling?" Amelia felt a cold dread snake up her spine. She knew that tone. It was the tone he used just before he delivered a killing blow in a negotiation or a particularly cruel remark at her expense. He was looking at her dress, a glint in his eye. "You know the designer of this dress, Antoine. He's a genius with fabrics. He told me this silk is meant to breathe, to move with the body. It's so delicate." He reached out his hand, going to the side of her dress, near her hip, where the fabric was designed to be gracefully ruched. The men in the circle watched, grinning, sensing a joke was coming. The women looked on with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. With a deft, deliberate tug that looked like an accident, a careless adjustment, he pulled the fabric away from her body. It was just for a second, but in the bright, unforgiving light of the ballroom, it was enough. The movement exposed the gentle swell of her hip and belly, and along with it, the network of pale, silvery stretch marks shimmering on her skin. There was a collective intake of breath. Richard let the fabric fall back into place. He leaned back, a triumphant smirk on his face, as if he'd just told the cleverest joke in the world. "See?" he said to his friends, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. "It looks like someone took a map of the New York City subway and tattooed it on my wife's stomach. I told her we should look into laser treatments, but she's sentimental." The laughter that followed was a physical blow. It was sharp, cruel, and echoing. Carter roared. Blake snickered, and their dates tittered behind their hands. Across the circle, Amelia saw Tiffany Vance raise her glass in a silent, mocking toast. Time seemed to slow down. The music from the orchestra, the clinking of glasses, the murmur of the crowd, it all faded into a dull roar. All Amelia could hear was the laughter. All she could see were their faces contorted in mirth at her expense. She looked at her husband, the man who had promised to love and protect her, and saw a stranger, a cruel, callous stranger, who had just sacrificed her dignity for a cheap laugh. The humiliation was absolute. It was a hot, searing wave that washed over her, leaving her cold and shaking. Tears pricked her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of them. She felt utterly devastatingly alone. Her hand, which had been resting on her stomach, fell to her side. She wanted to run, to disappear, to fold into herself until she was nothing. She took a step back, turning to flee to find any escape from the prison of that ballroom. But as she turned, her escape was blocked. A man stood in her path. He was older, perhaps in his late 60s, with a mane of silver hair and eyes that held a quiet, formidable intelligence. He was impeccably dressed in a simple, elegant tuxedo, and he carried himself with an aura of authority that made the boisterous laughter of Richard's circle seem cheap and childish. He was Harrison Davies, CEO of the global behemoth Thorne Industries and the keynote speaker of the evening. Richard's laughter died in his throat. His eyes widened. This was the man he had been trying to get a meeting with for 6 months. Thorne Industries was a legend, an old money empire of manufacturing, logistics, and tech that dwarfed Richard's own company. "Mr. Davies," Richard said, his voice instantly shifting back to his smooth, charming register. He stepped forward, extending a hand. "Richard Sterling, an honor, sir. I'm a great admirer of your work. This is my wife, Amelia." Harrison Davies's gaze was fixed not on Richard, but on Amelia. He completely ignored Richard's outstretched hand. His expression was one of profound concern, and something else. Deference. He took a step toward Amelia, his movement causing a hush to fall over the immediate area. Those nearby, sensing a shift in the room's power dynamic, turned to watch. Davies stopped directly in front of the humiliated, trembling Amelia. He looked at Richard's now hanging hand with a flicker of contempt before his eyes returned to her face. Then he did something no one could have expected. He bowed his head. It was not a grand theatrical bow, but a short, deep, and unmistakably respectful inclination of his head. And in a voice that was clear, steady, and loud enough for everyone in Richard's orbit to hear, he said the 5 words that would detonate a bomb in the middle of the ballroom and change Amelia's life forever. "Madam Chair, it is good to see you." The laughter that erupted from Richard's circle was not a sound of mirth. It was a weapon, sharp and percussive, each burst of it a physical blow against Amelia's soul. It came first from Carter, a loud, braying roar that was more animal than human. Blake followed with a high-pitched, wheezing sicker, his eyes gleaming with malicious delight. Their dates, 2 women who seemed sculpted from the same famine-chic mold as Tiffany Vance, let out delicate, tinkling titters behind perfectly manicured hands, their eyes darting towards Amelia, with a mixture of pity and cruel fascination. It was the sound of a pack of hyenas closing in on a wounded creature. Time didn't just slow down, it fractured. The elegant strains of the orchestra devolved into a meaningless drone. The warm golden light of the chandeliers seemed to turn harsh and interrogative like the floodlights of an execution ground. Every face in her immediate vicinity was a grotesque mask of amusement. And in the center of it all was her husband, Richard, basking in their adulation, his chest puffed out a triumphant smirk plastered on his handsome face. He had just performed his master stroke, sacrificing his pregnant wife's dignity for a moment of cheap dominance among his acolytes. A hot, suffocating wave of shame washed over Amelia. It was so potent it threatened to buckle her knees. Her breath caught in her throat, a strangled, silent gasp. She felt 1,000 eyes on her, even those from across the room, who had only heard the burst of laughter and turned to see its source. She was a spectacle, her deepest, most private vulnerability. Her changing body, a source of both wonder and anxiety, had been ripped open and laid bare for public amusement. She saw Tiffany Vance across the circle, her red lips curled into a victorious smile. She lifted her champagne flute in a slow, deliberate toast to Richard. A toast to their shared victory over the dowdy pregnant wife. In that single agonizing moment, 5 years of marriage coalesced into a single, horrifying truth. Every dismissive comment about her career, every backhanded compliment about her weight, every time he had made her feel small and unsophisticated, it wasn't just casual arrogance. It was a systematic campaign of erosion, designed to chip away at her self-worth until she was nothing more than a beautiful, compliant accessory he could control. He hadn't married a partner. He had acquired a subsidiary. The urge to flee was primal. She had to escape the cage of their laughter, the prison of their stares. Taking a shaky step back, she turned her only thought to find a dark corner, a bathroom. Any anonymous hole where she could shatter into 1,000,000 pieces in private. But her path was blocked. A man stood before her. His presence a sudden island of stillness in the turbulent sea of her humiliation. He was tall and distinguished, somewhere in his late 60s, with a full head of thick silver hair and the kind of piercing blue eyes that seemed to see everything. He was dressed in a classic, perfectly tailored tuxedo that made Richard's more fashionable Tom Ford suit look garish and new money by comparison. There was an aura about him, a quiet, immense gravity that seemed to bend the energy of the room towards him. It was Harrison Davies, the legendary CEO of Thorne Industries, the most powerful man in the room, and the evening's keynote speaker. He had evidently been standing nearby, watching the entire ugly exchange. His face was a mask of cold fury. His gaze fixed on Richard with an expression of such profound contempt that the laughter finally died in the throats of Richard's friends. Richard, oblivious to the man's expression, and seeing only the biggest networking opportunity of his life, broke into a wide, predatory grin. The humiliation of his wife was forgotten instantly, replaced by the thrill of the chase. "Mr. Davies," he exclaimed, his voice shifting instantly into its smoothest, most obsequious register. He strode forward, shouldering past a suddenly insignificant carter, and extended his hand. "Richard Sterling, Sterling Innovations. It is a genuine honor, sir. A true legend. I've been trying to get on your calendar for months. That last quarterly report from Thorne was a masterclass in market dominance." Harrison Davies did not even glance at Richard's outstretched hand. He left it hanging in the air, a pathetic monument to Richard's social climbing. Instead, his gaze, intense and focused, moved past Richard and settled solely on Amelia. The cold fury in his eyes melted away, replaced by something that looked shockingly like concern, and even more shockingly like deference. The immediate crowd, sensing a dramatic power shift, fell utterly silent. The whispers started at the edges, a ripple spreading outwards as people realized the titan of industry was at the center of this domestic drama. Davies took 2 deliberate steps forward, closing the space between himself and Amelia. He looked at her pale, stricken face, at the tear tracks starting to smudge her perfect makeup, at the way she held herself as if trying to physically shrink. Then he did something so unexpected, so utterly contrary to the established hierarchy of the room, that a collective gasp went through the onlookers. He bowed his head. It wasn't a theatrical flourish, but a short, deep, and unmistakable gesture of profound respect. A bow one might give to a monarch. And in a voice that was clear, steady, and resonated with an authority that silenced the entire ballroom, he spoke the 5 words that would act as a detonator, blowing Richard Sterling's world and Amelia's old life to smithereens. "Madam Chair, it is good to see you." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a physical pressure, a void where sound had ceased to exist. Richard's hand finally dropped to his side, his jaw slack with utter stupefied confusion. "Madam Chair," he stammered, looking from the powerful CEO to his trembling wife and back again, his quick-witted brain failing to compute the impossible data. A nervous, strangled laugh escaped his lips. "Mr. Davies, I'm afraid there's been some sort of mistake. This is my wife, Amelia Sterling. We haven't had the pleasure of a formal introduction." Harrison Davies finally deigned to look at Richard. His gaze was glacial. "There is no mistake, Mr. Sterling. I know precisely who your wife is. The more pertinent question is, do you—" He turned his attention back to Amelia, his expression softening once more. "I must apologize for my forwardness, madame. I know you valued your privacy, but I could not, in good conscience, stand by and witness that disgraceful display." His brief, withering glance towards Richard's friends made them shrink back as if they had been physically struck. Amelia's mind was a maelstrom. Madam Chair. The title echoed in her head. It was a phantom identity from a life she hadn't yet claimed, a name she had only seen on the complex legal documents her grandfather's lawyers had walked her through after his death. It was a role she was supposed to grow into a responsibility she feared. She had thought she had more time to just be Amelia. "Mr. Davies," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "Harrison, please," he corrected gently, "and we can discuss matters later." This is neither the time nor the place. But Richard, his confusion rapidly being consumed by a frantic, grasping avarice, would not be sidelined. An unknown, powerful connection between his wife and the CEO of Thorn Industries. This wasn't a problem. It was a jackpot. "Hold on just a minute," Richard demanded, stepping forward and attempting to reclaim his territory. He snaked an arm around Amelia's shoulders in a grotesque pantomime of husbandly protection. "What is all this Madam Chair nonsense, Amelia, darling? What's he talking about? Is this some kind of inside joke?" Amelia looked up at her husband's face, so close to her own. The fog of her humiliation was rapidly burning away, replaced by the clarifying Arctic fire of pure rage. She saw the naked greed in his eyes. He didn't care about her pain, only about the potential profit. With a sudden, sharp movement, she shrugged his arm off her shoulder as if it were a venomous snake. The simple, defiant act rendered Richard speechless. It was Harrison Davies who filled the void. "Thorn Industries, Mr. Sterling," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of a judge delivering a verdict, "was founded by a man named Marcus Thorn, a brilliant visionary and intensely private man who built an empire from a single patent and a formidable will." "Of course I know that," Richard said impatiently. "Everyone in business knows that. He passed away 5 years ago, left no direct heirs according to the financial press. The company is run by the board." The press, as is often the case, was only partially correct. Davies said, a slight, cold smile touching his lips. Marcus Thorn had one living heir whom he cherished above all else, his granddaughter, the daughter of his late son, a young woman he trusted implicitly, whose character he knew to be as strong as the steel his first factories produced. He left her his entire estate, his homes, his portfolio, and most importantly, his 90% controlling interest in Thorn Industries, to be held in an irrevocable trust until she either reached the age of 30 or chose to assume her position on the board. Her name. Harrison paused, looking directly at Amelia, with a warmth that seemed to infuse her with strength. "Is Amelia Thorn Sterling." A wave of shock rolled through the ballroom. Carter and Blake looked at each other, their faces the color of ash. Tiffany Vance's crimson lipstick suddenly looked garish against her ghost-white face. Richard's face was a comical mask of disbelief. "Thorn. Your maiden name was Thorn. You told me it was Miller." "Miller was my mother's name," Amelia said. Her voice was different now. The timid mouse had been evicted. In its place was a voice of cold, clear steel. "I used it to have a life of my own, to have a career, to maintain my privileges. It was what my grandfather wished. He wanted me to find someone who would love me." She paused, her eyes locking on Richard's. Not the Thorn fortune. It seems his precautions were in the end insufficient. The carefully aimed dart hit its target. A dark, ugly flush crept up Richard's neck. "So, you're—" He stammered the numbers, the sheer scale of it spinning behind his eyes like a broken slot machine. "You own it. Thorn Industries is yours." The concept was too vast. His own fortune, the one he lorded over everyone, was a child's piggy bank next to the global empire she controlled. He wasn't married to a demure art curator. He was married to an empress. The pivot was instantaneous and nauseating all to behold. The bully vanished, replaced by a fawning, desperate courtier. "Darling," he gasped, reaching for her hands. His eyes, which moments ago had held only mockery, now gleamed with a terrifying, rapacious light. "My God, Amelia. Why didn't you tell me we're a team? We're partners. This is incredible." This is our future. Think of the power, what we can build together." He pulled her closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Our daughter. She'll be an heiress to the greatest fortune in the world." That was it, the final unforgivable sin. The invocation of their child, not out of love, but as another asset to be leveraged, was the spark that ignited Amelia's remaining fear into pure, unadulterated power. She pulled her hands from his grasp and took a deliberate step back, creating a chasm between them. She stood taller, her posture transforming before their eyes. Her hand returned to her belly, not as a shield, but as a queen touches her scepter. "There is no we, Richard," she announced, her voice ringing with an authority that stunned the room into complete submission. "There is no our future. There is only my future, and the future of my child." She swept her gaze over the cowering group that had laughed at her. "For 5 years you have seen me as a silent accessory, an elegant piece of decoration on the arm of a powerful man. Tonight you laughed at my body, the very body that is creating a new life because it did not conform to your shallow, pathetic, and ultimately sterile definition of perfection." Her eyes hard as diamonds returned to her husband. "And you, Richard, you orchestrated it. You took the love I gave you, the trust I placed in you, and you twisted it into a leash. You tried to break me down to make me feel worthless so that I would be easier to manage. You didn't want a partner. You wanted a possession whose value you could dictate. You didn't want a wife. You wanted a mirror that only reflected your own perceived greatness." Tears finally welled, but they were not tears of shame. They were tears of righteous fury, of a queen awakened. "You mocked my stretch marks tonight." Her voice rose clear and strong, carrying to every corner of the silent hall. "You called them a flaw, a subway map, an imperfection to be lasered away. Let me be perfectly unequivocally clear. These marks are my badge of honor. They are the testament of my strength. They are the proof that I am capable of creating something real and beautiful, something your hollow, heartless world of acquisitions and appearances could never possibly comprehend. They are the map of my journey into motherhood, a journey you are no longer a part of. And they are the last, most intimate part of me you will ever have, the privilege of seeing." She turned her back on him, a gesture of finality that was more powerful than any slap, and faced Harrison Davies. "Harrison, I believe it is time I formally assumed my position. Please arrange an emergency meeting of the full board of directors for Monday morning, 9 a.m. sharp. I will be there." "Of course, Madam Chair," he replied, a flicker of a proud smile on his face. "And Harrison," she added, her voice dropping to a crisp executive tone, "have the Thorn Industries legal department contact my personal attorney, Catherine Beck, first thing in the morning. I will be filing for divorce on the grounds of extreme emotional cruelty and infidelity." She allowed her gaze to flick for a microsecond towards Tiffany Vance, who looked as if she might faint. "I'm sure Ms. Vance will be happy to provide a deposition, to avoid a subpoena. If not, I'm certain our corporate investigators can be very persuasive." Richard's face had crumpled. The mask of power was gone, revealing the terrified, weak man beneath. "Amelia, no. You can't," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "The prenup. Our assets are joined community property. Half of what's yours is mine. I'm entitled to it." A small, cold laugh escaped Amelia's lips. It was a sound he had never heard before, and it was the sound of his doom. "Oh, Richard, you truly are a fool," she said with chilling pity. You were so busy protecting your little pile of money from the poor art curator that you never bothered to read the document properly. My grandfather didn't accumulate a fortune of that magnitude by being careless. That prenuptial agreement was not drafted by your B-list lawyers. It was drafted by the finest legal minds in the country, the ones who structure international trusts for breakfast. It was not a shield to protect you, you idiot. It was a trap designed with surgical precision to protect the Thorne estate from predators. And you, with all your arrogance, you signed it with a smile and walked right in. She took one last look at his utterly broken face. The master of the universe had just discovered he was nothing more than a bug about to be squashed. "You wanted me to be perfect tonight, Richard," Amelia said, her voice dropping to a whisper that was more devastating than any shout. "Well, your wish came true. I am the perfect, flawless instrument of your complete and utter ruin. Enjoy the rest of the party. It is the last one you will ever attend as a man of any consequence." Without a backward glance, she turned. The crowd, which moments before had hemmed her in, parted for her as if by royal decree. With Harrison Davies walking respectfully by her side like a loyal general, Amelia Thorne. Madam Chair of Thorne Industries walked out of the ballroom, leaving the smouldering ruins of her old life and her former husband behind her. She was not running away. She was marching towards her throne. The heavy door of the Maybach closed with a sound like a bank vault, sealing shut, instantly encasing Amelia in a world of profound silence. The chaotic din of the gala, the shocked gasps, the frantic whispers, the distant pathetic cry of Richard's voice vanished as if it had belonged to another reality. The car smelled of rich, unadorned leather and cool, conditioned air. It was the scent of quiet, unassailable power. As the vehicle pulled away from the curb with a smooth, silent surge of acceleration. The glittering lights of the Centennial Grand Hotel bled into streaks in the side window. A fading nightmare she was finally waking from. Amelia leaned her head against the supple headrest, her body trembling with the aftershocks of adrenaline. She felt hollowed out, scoured clean by the raw, brutal emotions of the last hour. Humiliation, rage, fear. And now, beneath it all, a fragile, unfamiliar feeling was taking root liberation. She took a shuddering breath. Her hand spread protectively across the firm swell of her belly, where her daughter was a warm, living anchor in the storm of her life. "Are you all right, Madam Chair?" Harrison Davies's voice was a low, steady presence in the quiet car. It was devoid of pity, filled instead with a calm, grounding concern. She opened her eyes, the city lights reflecting like shattered jewels in their tear-filled surface. She turned to look at the man beside her, this unexpected savior, who had appeared in her darkest moment. "I don't know what I am, Harrison," she confessed, her voice raspy. "But for the first time, in a very long time, I think I'm going to be." A single tear escaped, tracing a path through the perfect mask-like makeup she suddenly despised. She wiped it away with the back of her hand. "Thank you. I mean it. For what you did. For what you said. You didn't have to step in like that." Harrison's gaze was kind, but his words were firm. "On the contrary," he replied, his silver hair catching the ambient glow of the streetlights. "It was both my duty and my distinct honor. Your grandfather, Marcus Thorne, was not just my employer. He was my mentor, my compass, and my dearest friend for over 30 years. A wistful expression softened his stern features. "He spoke of you constantly, you know, especially after your parents were gone. My Amelia. He would say she has a spine of steel she doesn't even know about yet. The world will try to bend her, but it will never, ever break her." He established the trust and the secrecy around your inheritance for a very specific reason. He once told me, "Power and money are magnets, Harrison. They attract the best, but they also attract the worst. I want my girl to find someone who loves her when she's just the rain, not when she's the whole damn storm." Harrison's eyes met hers in the dim light. He would be immensely proud of the storm you unleashed tonight. Hearing her grandfather's words, spoken aloud by someone who knew him so well, was like finding a key to a locked room inside herself. Marcus Thorne, the reclusive genius, had known. He had anticipated a man like Richard. The prenup, the trust, the quiet legal guardians he had placed in her life, it was all a suit of armor he had spent years forging for her. Tonight, in the crucible of public humiliation, she had finally grown strong enough to wear it. He built Thorne Industries to create tangible things. Harrison continued, his voice a low rumble. To solve problems, to push boundaries. He despised men like Richard. He called them hollow men. Men who don't build but only acquire and dismantle. Corporate raiders who see human beings as assets and liabilities. Marcus believed that wealth was a responsibility, that capital must have a conscience. That is the Thorne legacy. It has been waiting for you. It is now your legacy, Amelia. The weight of his words settled upon her, not as a burden but as a mantle. For 5 years, her own passions for art, for history, for quiet creation had been dismissed as quaint hobbies. Richard's world was one of ruthless, soulless commerce. Now she was being handed the reins to an empire built on principles that resonated with the very core of her being. "What happens now?" she asked the question, feeling both monumental and terrifyingly practical. "Now," Harrison said, his tone shifting into one of decisive action. "We orchestrate a quiet, elegant, and overwhelmingly decisive war. The first front is legal. Your personal attorney, Catherine Beck, is the sharpest family law practitioner in the country. Your grandfather retained her services for you years ago. She has been on standby, waiting for this day, though hoping it would never come. She will handle the divorce. It will be swift, merciless, and final. The second front," he went on, "is perception. My communications team is already at work. By morning, a new narrative will be seeded across the global financial press. This is not a messy celebrity divorce. This is the story of the reclusive heiress, Amelia Thorne, stepping out of the shadows to claim her birthright, to helm the company that is hers, by blood and by merit. The Gala incident will be framed as the catalyst and unfortunate display of disrespect that forced a private woman to reveal her public power. In this story, Richard Sterling is not the villain. He is worse. He is a footnote. The Maybach pulled into the private entrance of the Four Seasons Hotel. A security detail, discreet and professional, was already waiting. Harrison escorted her, not to a room, but to an entire residential wing that had been secured for her. The presidential suite was a world away from the cold, modernist penthouse she had shared with Richard. It was decorated in warm creams and deep blues, with plush carpets, shelves of actual books, and fresh flowers that smelled of home. It was a sanctuary. Alone for the first time, Amelia walked to the vast window and looked out over the glittering cityscape. This was the same view as from Stirling Tower, but seen from a different place through different eyes. She was no longer a prisoner in that view. She was its owner. With a hand that trembled only slightly, she made the call. Catherine Beck answered on the second ring, her voice crisp and alert. "Amelia, Harrison Davies informed me. I'm sorry it came to this, but I'm ready. Are you?" "I am," Amelia said, a newfound certainty in her voice. "Good," Catherine replied. Because I've been reviewing this file for 5 years, hoping you'd never have to use it. Marcus dotted every I and crossed every T. The prenup is unassailable. His assets, including the entirety of Thorn Industries, were placed in a multi-generational, irrevocable dynastic trust before your marriage. You are the sole lifetime beneficiary, and the trust is the shareholder. Richard has no claim. Not to the principal assets, not to the capital gains, not to a single paperclip from the company supply closet. We will be filing the papers first thing in the morning. They will be served to him at his office. As predicted, Richard's reaction was a pathetic and ugly storm. The texts began within an hour of him returning to the empty penthouse. First feigned concern, "Amelia, darling, where are you? I'm so worried. This is a misunderstanding." Then pleading, "Don't do this to us. To our baby. We can fix this. I love you." And finally, as the reality of his situation dawned, came the narcissistic rage. "You ungrateful bitch. I gave you everything. You'll come crawling back. You hear me? You are nothing without me." Amelia read the first few, a familiar sickness churning in her stomach. Then, with a deep cleansing breath, she blocked his number and forwarded the entire message history to Catherine Beck. It was a small act, but it felt like slamming a door on a prison cell from the outside. The following Monday morning, Amelia Thorn walked into the soaring granite and glass lobby of the Thorn Industries global headquarters. A palpable ripple of energy followed her murmurs. Stairs employees suddenly finding urgent reasons to be in the lobby. She wore a simple but impeccably tailored navy blue maternity dress. Her hair was pulled back in a chic, no-nonsense bun. Her face was free of the heavy makeup she had worn at the gala. She was not a trophy. She was a commander. Harrison met her by the elevator bank. "Welcome home, Madam Chair," he said, a proud smile touching his eyes. The boardroom was on the 80th floor, a space designed to command respect, with a vast mahogany table and a single floor-to-ceiling window, offering a godlike view of the city below. The 10 members of the executive board, titans of industry and finance, stood as one when she entered. Amelia felt a tremor of pure, unadulterated fear. These were people who had dedicated their lives to this company. Who was she? But then she remembered her grandfather's words, a spine of steel, and Harrison's confidence in her. She walked to the head of the table to the chair that had been empty for 5 years, and took her place. "Good morning," she began, her voice resonating with a calm authority she didn't know she possessed. "I am Amelia Thorn. For many of you I have been an abstract concept for the past few years, a name in a trust document. I want to start by saying that I am not here to dismantle the incredible work you have all done. I am here to honor my grandfather's legacy, and to lead this company into a future he would have been proud of." She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the table, meeting each board member's eyes. "My grandfather believed that true innovation comes from a place of conscience. Therefore, effective immediately, I want to double the R&D budget for our Sustainable Technologies division. I want Thorn Industries to be carbon neutral by 2035, and I want us to lead the world in solving the problems of tomorrow, not just profiting from the problems of today." For the next 2 hours, she didn't just talk. She listened. She asked the CFO, a notoriously skeptical man named Peterson, to walk her through the company's debt structure. She engaged the brilliant young head of AI, Dr. Aris Thorn, in a detailed discussion about the ethics of machine learning. When one of the older board members condescendingly asked about her qualifications, she smiled serenely. "My primary qualification," she answered smoothly, is that I share the exact DNA and core values of the man who built this company from nothing. My other qualification is that I am a fast learner, and I am surrounded by the most brilliant minds in the industry. Your job is to advise me. My job is to lead you. I have no doubt we will find a way to do both effectively." A stunned silence fell over the room, followed by a slow nod from Peterson. In that moment, the board saw her not as an heiress, but as a leader. The spine of steel was on full display. The weeks that followed were a blur of intense work and personal reclamation. The divorce was finalized with brutal speed. Richard's legal challenges were dismissed as frivolous. His public downfall was catastrophic. The PR campaign had painted him as a fool who fumbled a dynasty. His business, built on the illusion of his connection to a greater fortune, crumbled like a house of cards. Deals collapsed. Credit lines were pulled. He was forced to sell the Bugatti, then the art collection, her art collection, which Catherine Beck promptly reclaimed on her behalf, and finally the penthouse in the tower, bearing his now tarnished name. He became an exile in the city he once thought he owned. 2 months after that fateful night at the Gala, in the quiet, sunlit master bedroom of her new home, a historic brownstone she was personally overseeing, the restoration of Amelia gave birth to a healthy 7-pound baby girl. Holding Chloe Thorne in her arms, feeling the fierce, boundless love that radiated from her heart, Amelia knew she was complete. She looked at her daughter's tiny, perfect face, the miniature fists, the downy, soft hair. This was real. This was what mattered. Later, as she lay with her daughter sleeping on her chest, she gently touched the skin of her own stomach. The stretch marks had faded to pale, silvery lines like rivers of pearl on her skin. Richard had called them a flaw. The world might see them as an imperfection, but to Amelia, they were sacred text. They were the map of her transformation, the lines that connected the broken wife in the gilded cage to the powerful mother and leader she had become. They were not scars of shame. They were the beautiful, indelible proof that she had not just created a life, but had finally, truly claimed her own. So what can we take away from Amelia's incredible journey? This story serves as a powerful reminder that our greatest strengths are often forged in our deepest moments of pain. The very things someone might use to mock us, our vulnerabilities, our scars, our perceived imperfections, can become the source of our most profound power. Amelia's stretch marks a symbol of shame in her husband's eyes, became her badge of honor, representing the birth of her child and the birth of her own strength. Her story teaches us that self-worth is not something that can be given or taken away by others. It is something we must claim for ourselves. If you were moved by Amelia's fight for dignity and her ultimate triumph, please give this video a like and share it with someone who might need to hear this message. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more true-life stories of betrayal, resilience, and incredible revenge. What would you have done in Amelia's position? Let us know in the comments below.